Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are on to pattern number 14 and it is the same pattern that we have been doing, not the same pattern but similar to the other patterns that we have done previously for pattern number 13 and pattern number 12. I realized in the last two videos that the code may have been a tad bit confusing to understand how I came up with the formula to print the blank spaces. So this video would be a little bit longer because I will manipulate the code a little bit to show you how I came up with the formula to print the blank spaces. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is our for loop, and that's going to take care of our rows. That stays the same, that has not changed. Okay, now where does our row begin? Our row begins at 1 and it ends at 7. Pretty straightforward. So we're going to say row for int I is equal to 1 less than and equal to num, whatever num is, I plus plus. Great. Now inside the I loop, let us print our first for loop, which is going to be a J loop, and that's going to be for the blank columns. Okay, where does our blank column start? And if you remembered correctly, the formula that I came up with is 2 times num minus I, J greater than I. And then we're going to do a decrement, okay? So we have our J loop that takes care of our blank columns. Now let us print our blank columns, because of course this loop just iterates and checks. What do we need it to print? We need it to print a blank space every time this condition is met. Now let's go for our next for loop. And where does that start? Our columns start, and let's look at this pattern to determine with me where our columns start. So on the first iteration, we have I is equal to 1. Let me put it in. Yeah, I is equal to 1. So we have row is equal to 1. Additionally, J is also equal to 1. So our rows is equal to 1. Our column is also equal to 1. On the second iteration, we have I is equal to 2 and our J loop starts at 2. So we could safely say that J is equal to whatever I is equal to, okay? J is greater than and equal to 1, and then J decreases. And why do we say that J decreases? Let's look at our pattern again. J starts at 2 on the second iteration, which is the same as the row number, but it goes down to 1. On the sixth iteration, J also starts at 6 because remember, rows run horizontally, columns run vertically. So we have our column at 6, then it goes to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we could safely say that instead of complicating our code, we could safely say that J starts at I, whatever I is, and then it decreases. And that is why we added a decrement here. Now let us print our J loop. And this is a print statement, not a print ln. And let us print our lines. And again, this second J loop takes care of our numbered columns. Okay, so let us run this code. And then I would manipulate the code a little bit to show you how I came up with line number 19. How many rows would you like to print? I say 7. There is our pattern, okay? Our pattern is correct. Our code is correct. Now let me explain to you what we're doing. I is equal to 1, I less than and equal to num, meaning that we're going to print from row 1 all the way to whatever the user input is. We're getting num from line 12, where we say int num is equal to scan.nextInt. This is our user input. This is what we're using here. For line 19 of our code, okay, j is equal to 2 times num minus I, j greater than I. So I am going to explain this a little bit, and then I'll show you how I came up with this formula. On the first iteration, okay, we're saying 2 times num 7 minus I, okay, which is 14, and on our first iteration I is 1. 14 minus I would be 14 minus 1 is equal to 13. Okay, is 13 greater than I? I, yes, because I on our first iteration is 1, and 13 is greater than I, which would make this statement true and a blank statement would print. On our subsequent iteration, the only iteration that makes this statement false is on our final iteration. So on our final iteration, so we're going to say 7th iteration, okay? On our 7th iteration, we have 2 times 7 minus 7, which is going to give us 14 minus 7, which is 7. Okay, so therefore, on our 7th iteration, j is also 7. I is also 7 because it's our 7th iteration. J will not be greater than I. Therefore, this entire loop will not print on our 7th iteration because it makes j greater than I false. So this would skip, and then the second j loop will print. And that is why we have this with 0 spaces. Another thing I want you to notice is that on our first iteration, our answer is 13. And this 13 represents 13 spaces. Okay? The 13 represents 13 spaces that will print. So in all the program is saying that I need to print 13 spaces. However, when j is equal to I, when j is no longer greater than I need to print whatever I is. Okay? So on the first iteration, here, on the 13th space that's printed, j and I is the same. Therefore, 1 is printed. Okay? On the second iteration, when I is equal to 2, j is also equal to 2. So then, it makes this statement false and this statement true. And therefore, 2, 1 will print. And that's how it continues. I really hope that makes sense. To further explain this to you, let me print stars and you would see. Okay, how many rows would you like to print? 7. Okay, now let's look at this very carefully. We have, like we said, on the first iteration, 13 spaces are supposed to print. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Because on the final count, j is not greater than I, therefore it prints whatever I is. On the second iteration, we still have that same 13 spaces. However, on the last 2 count, j is not greater than I, therefore 2 and 1 will print. I really hope this makes sense. If you need further explanation, drop me a comment and I could probably do a little bit of a write-up. But this is our pattern. We're going to push ahead with pattern number 15, which is just the inverse of pattern number 14. Thank you so much. Happy testing, and join me for our 15th pattern in this 60 pattern series. Have a great day and happy testing.